Welcome back to Let My People Know. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Rabbi Thomas Orms of Mishkan David for his second part, Interfaith Life, who brings us a very unique story. He was raised in an interfaith home with one parent being Orthodox Jew and the other Baptist Christian. Rabbi Orms will speak to us about his challenges and victories associated with his life journey. This and more when Let My People Know continues. Welcome back to Let My People Know. Today I'm honored to have our own Rabbi Thomas Orms from Mishkan David. He's going to share with us his life story and victories that are associated with his journey. Rabbi, again, welcome to see you again, and I'm so happy to have you because I know that you're a wealth of information. You're going to pass this along to the rest of the congregation right here, our audience. So basically, for people that are watching now can watch the first portion of it. This is the second portion of it.
Absolutely.
And what we're going to try to address now is the challenges that you faced as living in an interfaith child, right? And had to choose between going to a synagogue or a Christian Baptist church.
I was a minor, so it wasn't really a choice. But
Right. But that's where I wanted to capture that story, because basically I felt that there was sorrow in understanding, people understanding you, people rejecting you. Those are the things that I want to share with our audience, that it happens, that it's understandable. And hopefully at the end of the conversation we'll share your solution to everything.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So can you just start with us as far as telling us what the difficulties were from you working both sides of the journey?
Well, purely from, I would say, I guess, a community standpoint, the structure of Jewish versus Christian life is almost completely different. I mean, yeah, of course there's going to be similarities here and there, and the biggest similarity, which we can't avoid, is that it's the same God, right? Like we said last week.
Right.
But just the way life works is completely different. And so it was very hard to reacclimate myself on a weekly basis, because this wasn't something that I had extended periods of time with my father and then extended periods of time with my mother. The way that the visitation worked between my parents after the divorce was every week. So I was living two lives every single week, sometimes days apart, right? And so I would be with my mother one day, 24 hours later I would be with my father. And life looked completely different from one day to the next. And so just from basic psychology, basic standard of living, minus the spiritual, minus the societal, minus the communal, just as a child going through that in my developing stages, the stark difference of what my life, but back then it was both of my lives, right? But it was my life,
both of them.
Looked like. And just from the point of like mental capacity to be able to navigate that stuff as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, it was very difficult.
Now, your dad was of Orthodox Jew, and your mom was a Baptist Christian. Now,
yes,
but I wanted to ask you that there was a difficulty as far as the understanding of who you were.
Oh, absolutely.
So, can you share with us the difference between the two?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely when it comes to the people of God, right, Jewish or not Jewish, Christian, everyone is adamant that they're right.
Right, exactly.
That's why we have over 40,000 denominations of faith today in Christianity alone, because everyone says, no, this one is right, no, this one is right. No, my version. Why? Because this verse says this and that verse says that, and you're saying it out of order because your eyebrow is cocked to the left. Your version of God is wrong. Mine is right.
Now,
right?
Now the Jewish community did not accept it because you had a non-Jewish mom. Is that correct?
So
is that how it works?
in rabbinical Judaism today, based on the writings of the Talmud and the Mishnah, which was later on adopted into more modern sages, which is like, antiquities, so that's 2nd century, and then of course way later, in the late medieval period to the industrial age, all of Jewish life is added commentary, and that's basically the basis of the faith today. It's Torah principles,
right, but more...
really it's not so much studying the Torah as it is studying what the rabbis have to say about the Torah.
Yes, I agree with that.
And one of the deviations that happened, and it was due to World War II, was there were more Jewish women that came out of certain parts in Europe that survived versus Jewish men, because the systemic annihilation of the Jewish people was planned, that you focus on the elimination of males, because if there would be a rebellion, a male is the stronger biologically, right? So
the Egyptians did that with the
of course. It's the classic way, regardless who the players were in the game is always take out the men, because it is most effective to destroy men if you're going to destroy an entire race of people.
Right, but now they basically, your own community was denying you your rights as Judaism.
Right. The reason why that is, and I was giving that pretext so I could explain, is because what ended up happening is that there were Jewish women that had been raped by non-Jewish men during that time period. And so there were Jewish babies that you could only identify Jewish because of the mother. Why? Because the father was dead.
Right.
So what ended up happening was, over time, they adopted that as the premier standard for determining your Jewishness, was through the mother. Even though, biblically, in the Torah, throughout the entirety of the Bible, was through the father.
The patriarchs.
Right. It was the patriarchal determination of whether you were Jewish or not. And so that part was hard, because having read the Bible, I said, well, the Bible says I'm Jewish because of my dad.
Right.
But everyone I love
is saying,
and my community is telling me I'm less than, or I'm not, because
so you're half
of my
Jew,
mother.
Kind of a half a Jew, kind of a...
Yeah, and so more in the Orthodox doesn't matter. Like I was explaining previously, there's other sects of Judaism where they're a little bit more loose with their defining terms, because they realize, like, oh my gosh, we're really turning our own people away. We got to stop that.
Right.
But in the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox circles today, if you are not Jewish through your mother, then even without saying it, you can sense the change in the air.
Yeah, as far as
the atmosphere
rejected,
for you,
you're not pure breed.
is different.
You're not like a pure breed Jew. Right. Now, as far as the Christian side, did you receive the same kind of repercussions?
Yeah, I mean, it was not so much from the adults; it was more from the kids. And on the Jewish side, it was all around. And that's not to say that they were worse, but...
Anti-Semitic or anything like that?
Well, yeah, so for the kids, it was much worse. One of the worst experiences that I had was growing up. I went to private Christian schools, okay? My parents had established that before they got divorced, and my mother did her best as a single mom to keep me in good schools.
Right.
But... what ended up happening?
Job, by the way.
Yeah, she's amazing. Shout out, Mom. But what ended up happening was my 5th grade year, and I won't name the school, obviously, but that was when the visitation and me missing days, because what would happen was every High Holy Day, the Feast of the Lord, I would get off school and be with my dad. And so kids in my class started noticing, hey, you're not off on Christmas and Easter and Halloween and Memorial Day like the rest of us. You're off on also these other days. Right. Why is that happening? And it was because
confusion.
I had been with those same kids for a few years at that point. And so they're like, yeah, you just take off the randomest weird days in the year, which, being raised in Christian homes themselves and being raised in Christian doctrine that doesn't recognize the feasts of the Lord in that way.
Right.
They were like, what is this?
Right.
And so in my, desire to not lie, I said the truth. I said, well, my dad is Jewish, and we celebrate the Jewish holidays. And I'll never forget, I see the boy's face even now. He did a scowl and he said, Jewish? You're Jewish? And I said, yeah. He goes, oh, okay. And he turned around and walked away. Mm-hmm. Later that day, apparently, it spread to my entire 5th grade class. And there was another boy, he was like the leader of the pack.
Right.
What ended up happening was he decided that during PE in the locker room, he was going to try to fight me.
Wow.
So we fought.
But the reasons was because just childish activities?
Jew boy.
Oh, really?
He used other profanities that I won't repeat.
Okay.
There is the Jewish equivalent of like disparaging the race of a Jewish person. It's a word that starts with a K. I won't say it.
Right, okay.
But he said that. Jew boy, and just, a lot of other insults. Yeah.
Right.
And so we fought. But what happened was, I ended up winning that fight.
Wow. Okay.
But
that's
because he was the most popular boy in the class, now the whole class was against me.
Wow.
And I remember at one point I was on the floor like this, and I saw even there were the girls in my class that were kicking me.
Wow.
But what happens is in school, if you win the fight, the winner gets in trouble.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So when I got taken to the dean's office, I was reprimanded because I had won the fight. By the end of the fight, I was the boy that was on top of the other
one. Yeah.
Right? So I went home that day and I told my mom, I said, if you don't get me out of this school, I'm going to kill myself. Because I had no friends. And if I was going to have to fight every single day, so
you're basing their lack of knowledge of the scriptures for the insults that they were flaring to you, because that's what I noticed.
Well, it's hard to say if it's just lack of knowledge of the scriptures.
They were listening from somewhere. They had to pick this up somehow.
Well, yeah. So it's I think it's something spiritual. And I think when you don't realize that it's the same God. And the only difference between one side of the other is a difference on certain views of how the Bible plays out, then of course, that's going to have a trickle-down effect.
So technically, both sides were actually rejecting you to some degree.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, how did you navigate through all of that?
Well, outside of like the spiritual part of my journey, it was a lot of counseling. My mother, she sent me to counseling because when you're rejected to that scale, you become angry. And it was around that time period where I started to say, you know what, this God that supposedly both of my parents worship, and all these people, they just talk about God all the time, they're full of it, and he couldn't possibly be who he says they are. And so that was when I started to even consider the possibility of denying his existence, because all I had was all of these people around me that supposedly knew who God was loved God, right, had the Bible, had the scriptures, had the way, right?
but
tearing you
apart.
They wanted me to die.
Wow.
Because at one point, what else do I do?
Right, correct.
If me breathing is a problem, the very fact that I am who I am is a problem, what do I do?
Now, you did mention that you went into the secular, you left both sides and you basically went into the secular world, which probably was, in some cases, even worse.
Well, yeah, so at that point, I had constructed enough mechanisms for myself to survive.
Right.
I had learned that if I'm going to have any friends, I might as well just not be honest. And so from that point forward, when I transitioned out of private school and my mother put me into public school because, of that incident and a few others, and, and I was very angry. I was very hard for her to deal with as a single mother at home.
Now, did the public school treat you the same, or they just didn't care?
So what happened was when I got to public school in 6th grade, I had completely reinvented myself.
Gotcha.
So I didn't talk about my heritage at all. I didn't tell anyone I believed in God.
Sort of like a chameleon working your way through.
Oh yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
Right.
I decided that I wasn't going to go through those things ever again, and so. And God is not looking out for me. If really there is a God out there, He doesn't know who I am, at least.
Yep.
And by that point, I had decided that I would focus on the secular parts of who I am. So if someone asked me, where's your family from? I would say I'm Peruvian and German. Right? I wouldn't say, I'm a Sephardic Jew, I used to.
Right.
So I ended up leaning really heavily into my Latin roots. I made a lot of Latino friends, and that was my way of being able to fit in. But even then, only to a certain point, because I'm half white.
Right.
So it was just exposed another layer where being a biracial person, you will never get 100%.
No,
not with
anybody.
Not with anyone. No matter who you are, you will never get 100%.
Now you're at that point where you have a better knowledge of God. You're very intellect, and you move beyond that by reinventing yourself. When did you find God again once more?
Yeah, it was a long journey. So part of it was my biological father ended up finding the Mishkan, right? But again, at that point in my life, I had a sense that Rabbi Gabe and the Rebbetzin Esther were different. They have this warmth and
feelings, fuzzy,
and now I know it to be the presence of the Lord, right? But so I knew they were different, but regardless, this place was still a God place, and it wasn't
religion.
I was here because I had to be here because I'm 11 and I go where my biological father tells me to go, and so. Yeah, he started attending this congregation probably about when I was 10, 11 years old. And so I knew the people, and the people knew me, but I never paid attention to anything really Gabe said or did. For me, it was just God. Plus, it was just synagogue. Right. It was just religious. I'm Jewish, and we're Jews, and we go to synagogue.
That's
and whatever.
So the word did not actually penetrate your heart at that moment.
No. But I did have a sense that the people here were different
than what
I had experienced. But at the same time, I wasn't going to trust any of you or anyone. I still wasn't me. I put on who I needed to be to survive in that moment.
I got you there.
Even being in a quote-unquote nicer place.
Right.
So that went on. So from really 8 years old until 20 years old, that was my life. Not knowing who I am, the little parts of me that remained obviously sometimes would come out, because at the end of the day, I still am a human being. I still have real feelings, real emotions.
Right, of course.
And ultimately every human wants positive connection, right? Which is how we were designed.
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly.
That's
Commune.
the blueprint, right? He breathed life into us, right? So ultimately that's everywhere and how we're supposed to be.
Right. I agree.
But what ended up happening was, obviously I know now this was the design of the Lord, but I go to college, and now what ended up happening was I decided, okay, I did high school, and I had a lot of problems in high school as well, but I've always been sharp, I've always been intelligent, I could study and I could pass my grade tests, and so intellectually that was sort of another defense for me. You weren't going to ask too much about me if you just thought, okay, hey, you're smart, right? So you'll just ask more about what I know. You won't really ask who I am. Right. So that was another layer for me, was the academics. So then what happened was when I got to college, I ended up joining a Jewish fraternity. It was the largest fraternal Jewish organization in the world, still to this day. And again, I don't have to mention who they are, but always I just had this yearning I always wanted to be back home. I'm Jewish. I always wanted to be Jewish. I always wanted to fit in. Excuse me. But this is, again, another ideation of a different crowd.
Right.
So some of these kids were raised in secular Jewish homes, so
right.
they didn't give a crap. Pardon my language. If I was, if I was half
happy,
or if I wasn't, it didn't matter.
It was more.
Some of them were conservative Jewish kids. Some of them were Reformed Jewish kids. Some of them were Orthodox Jewish kids.
Right.
But we were all there pursuing our higher education. So, but there was still some where they knew I was not fully Jewish, I was half Jewish. So there would be those little like digs here and there every once in a while.
Right.
But I was more so accepted. But that's also when I started to really get into like the party scene and drugs and alcohol. So I lost myself even further. And I ended up on academic probation because after a while I just stopped going to class. And by this point, I was a full-blown drug addict. And, addiction was my way of at least controlling
your life,
partially the chaos that I lived with on a daily basis. Because I didn't really have much will to live at that point. I just was always too scared to commit suicide, because I thought, if I do that, and if God is who he says he is and the Bible's true, everyone says you commit suicide, you go to hell, which that's not in the Bible. But regardless, I didn't have the courage to do it. So I was just going through the motions. Day by day, I would wake up, I would get high, hang out with my friends, we would get higher. Then as the afternoon and the evening
but that
came,
eventually
we would get highest.
That did eventually lead you to back to God.
So I had a lot of experiences in college that kind of, it was like the Lord, like, hey, I'm here,
right?
Even you're in the middle of the mud and you're eating with the pigs right now. I'm still here, buddy.
Right.
And for me, it was like, if I acknowledged it, then I had to acknowledge, number one, he loves me.
Right, he does.
Because he's talking to me, even though I've rejected the idea of him in full, right? But then if that's true, I have to admit everything in my life that I had been doing up until that point was me just running. And to be able to face reality in that way was too strong. I didn't have the capacity to do it. I didn't have the mental calories to go through that exercise, right? So every time God poked me, I would ignore it. He would poke me again. I would ignore it. So, because of how loving and how merciful he is,
right,
he blew my life up. I went into academic probation. So school,
gone.
Sorry, you haven't been doing what kids in college do, which is study. We can't have you come back.
Wow.
So my option to go back to school, done. The fraternity that I was a part of is very prestigious, and they have standards, right? So because we're Jewish kids, we have to be the best.
Right.
In finance, in fitness, in academia, in all assets of life, right? Because in the modern age, a Jew's best defense is the life that he can build for himself.
Right.
So they said, hey, man, what's this? It's the lowest GPA that any member has ever had since the inception of our organization. But we love you. You're a cool guy. You party like the hardest out of all of us. When you come, the party is like you're the life of the party, and you're a great guy. But sorry, you are excommunicado.
Excommunicado. Oh, there you go.
And so my mother and my stepfather at the time, amazing people, loved them so much. They now discovered all of this, right? Because at a certain point, I can't hide it. It's like, well, this is the paperwork, and so I knew so number one, I didn't want to go back home to them because, again, it was
your lifestyle, all the shame that you had.
Yeah, just tremendous amounts of guilt and shame. And then it's like, well, what was I going to do? It was nothing that I could possibly do. So what ended up happening was my biological father reached out, And, I hadn't talked to him in several years at that point, because part of it was he and I, even until the day that he passed, he and I didn't have a great relationship. And it wasn't because I didn't want to have a good relationship with him. It's just that, he didn't have the capacity. That's just plain and simple what it is. And I always struggle talking about that, because it's like I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I also have to tell my story.
It's just
I have
a reality.
to be truthful, right? And so, he didn't have the capacity to, have a healthy relationship with me as his son. He had just been through too many things in his life, and the choices that he had made, by the time I got to that point, even if he had good intentions and he tried to make reparation between us, which he did, there was just such an insurmountable amount of damage that he had done. But I also had nowhere else to go. And what ended up happening was he invited me to come live with him in his home at that time. And, I weighed my options, and I was like, well, I could try to maybe work for the summer and save up some money, and I could come back to school and apply for, monitored academic probation, which is...
just to reestablish yourself.
Yeah. Or I go live with my dad, and it's, hey, see what happens. But again, at this point, it's like I didn't have any ambition or goal, dreams or visions.
When did
nothing.
God come into the equation?
So what ended up happening was the one stipulation that he had was, if you come live with us, we're not going to charge you rent. We'll provide food, lodging for you, the whole nine, because we know you have nothing.
Right.
I mean, the receipts are there. The one thing that you do to pay your rent is we want you to come to the Mishkan to service. That's how you pay your rent. Friday, Saturday. So what ended up happening was my first 3 or 4 months of attendance, I came and I had sunglasses and headphones on.
Right.
And I sat all the way in the back corner, and I never said a word to anyone.
Right.
And you didn't bother me, I didn't bother you. Right. I'm here on business. I'm paying my rent.
Right, that's it.
Period, end of story. Greet your neighbor, Shabbat Shalom. You're all a bunch of weirdos giving each other hugs and kisses. I cannot stand it. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Right. But then, one night, I says, I've known Rabbi Gabe since I was a child. He's never given me any reason to not trust him. And this is his vocation. This is what he does, right? So why don't I just give him a listen? So that night I took one headphone out, just one. And I said, if I don't like what he has to say, or if I don't agree with it, or if I can't poke holes in it, right? Because regardless, even though my relationship with God at that point was like zero, pretty much, I still knew the Bible because I had read it my entire life. And so I knew if whoever, pastor, rabbi, if they were speaking, I had the capacity to discern whether or not they were being biblically accurate. At a minimum. Just from like an academic standpoint. No spiritual,
just the logistics of it.
If you say the words and you're quoting chapter and verse, I'll know, hey,
he's right or wrong.
You're either full of it or it's in there.
Gotcha. No, gotcha.
So he goes through this whole message, and I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, he's a rabbi for a reason. I can't refute that. Chapter and verse. At least he's not lying to his people, right? And that was my conclusion. Okay, hey, Rabbi Gabe's cool. But then he says, okay, the Lord told me I'm going to pray for people. And he hasn't done it since then. This is 20 years ago. Or no, I'm sorry. This is 10 years ago, in 2015. Okay? He comes down off the bima and he starts praying for people. And first off, when he said, "Oh, the Lord told me," I was like, "Dude, this guy's a quack." I mean, God
Right.
talks,
Right.
and God talks to you. We're in a tiny place in the middle of a
Nowhere.
suboptimal city in the state of Florida. Like, God is going
Right.
to talk to
Talk
you.
to you.
Like, yeah, man, you know your Bible, but God is talking. Ridiculous,
Right.
I mean, my science, my
Mind
intellect
was
like,
interfering
"That's-
with,
no."
with reality. Yeah.
What?
It was not part of the five
Audible?
senses.
I mean,
Yeah.
let's put this guy in a straitjacket. You know, like, what do you mean God is talking? And regardless, though, people come up. And like I said, I've been in church. I've been in synagogue my whole life. I've seen people get prayed over. I've heard how people pray. I've witnessed how people pray. You know, the big preacher and, you know, like
Go
laying
right,
the
lay
hands
hands,
and
boom,
throw the blanket.
over, yeah.
Or, you know,
Right.
in Judaism, we pray with the book open and we daven and we recite the prayers, you know, and that's our way of sacrifice is to pray unto
Unto the
Hashem,
Lord.
right? But he's praying different. The people are coming up to him. He's closing his eyes, not saying anything. He's closing his eyes and holding the mic. Then he opens his eyes and he says, "The Lord told me to tell you X, Y, Z." And I says, "Oh my God, what kind of place?" I'm so happy that all I have to do is pay rent,
Yeah, man.
and I gotta get out of here, man.
Right.
But again, the Lord,
Not you.
hey,
Yeah. What are you doing?
this idea forms
Right.
in this super big brain that I
Right,
have,
right.
right? That's refuting and disputing. An idea forms and says, "Go up for prayer." Horrible idea. Why would I go up for prayer with him?
Right.
Worst idea I've ever had. This goes completely against my evolutionary biology. If I am optimizing my survival for a human experience, I'm not going to subject myself to the prayers of a rambling madman in front of a congregation of people I don't give a flying you know what about.
Yeah. It sounds like pretty logical.
All logic, you know? Plus, if he is right, I'm expecting that he's going to eviscerate my character in front of everyone. Hey, buddy, you're an alcoholic, you're a drug addict, you're a fornicator, you're a liar, you're a this, you're a that. I thought that even if I were to decide to do this stupid idea, there would be no beneficial outcome for me to get prayed for other than him telling me things I already know.
Right.
God doesn't love me, that I'm gone too far,
right.
and yeah, you're a half-breed, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right. Persecution again from God himself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, you know, like God, what, God is going to talk to me? No, he'll talk to these people.
yeah.
You know, these are the sheep, you know, I'm the, you know, wolf,
The wolf.
whatever, right?
The black
But
sheep.
no, again, go up for prayer. The same idea, go up for prayer. And this just doesn't stop. And I'm like getting upset because I'm like, why am I thinking this? Like, this is
profound. Yeah.
Like, on a percentage standpoint, this should not be the thought that is going through my mind right now.
Right.
This shouldn't be it. Go up for prayer. Go up for prayer.
Right.
So everyone goes up for prayer, including my wife currently.
Right.
She was one of the people that went up for prayer. And I remember seeing her. She went up for prayer, gave her a word, she started weeping.
Right.
And that was the story with everyone. They were either like super excited, or they
Yeah.
were crying their eyes out, or they were like blasé. It was like a whole
Mishmash.
of different reactions.
Right.
But regardless, there was no one like, "Oh, you're wrong, you're a piece of garbage, Rabbi Gabe." Everyone seemed to have a positive experience.
Right.
Right? And so then he says, "Okay, guys, the Lord tells me it's time to wrap up the service. If there's anyone else that wants prayer, now's the time." I raised my hand. I looked at my hand and I was like, "Oh my God. How dare you betray me in this dire moment of need?" So he calls me up. And This is a part where I can never talk about without getting emotional. Because before the kids' room was here, it was a wall of couches. And so I'm the furthest distance possible from where he is in the front to where I am. That's a long walk.
Right.
Especially under scrutiny.
Yeah.
Because what did he do? He called me out. Young Thomas, come on up. So I get up. Everything is like in slow motion. But what ended up happening was the entire congregation stood up. And everyone had their hands reached out to me. And I says, this is the weirdest ritual cult that I've ever been in my entire life. But I see some people are smiling, some people are weeping, but they all stood for me. And these are people that I have not been kind to. These are people that when they came up to greet me, I said, leave me alone.
Right.
Don't talk to me.
Right.
I don't do the Shabbat Shalom garbage that you're doing. Leave me alone. So these are a group of people that I haven't been kind to. But they're standing, and they're smiling, and they're weeping.
To get you for the prayer, to get you to be prayed upon.
So that was the first time I felt love truly from a group of strangers. And it was unwarranted. Because if it's a transaction, all I did was put negative equity. I wasn't kind.
Right.
I was mean.
Right.
And yet, they're excited that I'm getting prayed for. So this blows logic out the window. It's transrational.
Right.
That's the thing with real love. It doesn't make any sense. That's what makes it real love.
Right.
So I go up and I make it to the front after what seems like, a 10-year walk from the back to the front. And Rabbi Gabe says, give me a second. Let me talk to the Lord. And so I was like, oh God, here it comes. I'm gonna get it.
It's cooked, yeah.
I'm getting the whooping that I've deserved for this entire time.
Right.
And he opens up his eyes and he says, are you ready? And I was like, I guess. So he takes his right hand and he puts it on my shoulder. The moment he touched me was like a lightning bolt went through my entire body. From the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. Tingles. Everywhere. And it was something that I'd never felt before. It was a feeling that I was completely naked. That all of who I was, whoever I was, even if I didn't know who I was right there in that moment.
Wow.
And I felt presence for the first time in my entire life.
Of holiness, kind of?
Love.
Love, okay.
Unimaginable. And he says to me, you have nothing to be ashamed of.
The rabbi said that?
Rabbi Gabe. Right. He says to me, you have nothing to be ashamed of. When you come here, your past stops at the door, and it's just you and God.
Amen. Wow.
Now, what he didn't know was that I was an insomniac. I had trouble sleeping for years. I went home that night, and I slept for 11 hours.
Wow. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Well, Rabbi, listen, we have our next story. We're going to have to cut it short and bring to a third part so we can get the conclusion of what's happening. Hopefully, the last part is, I would believe, my best, because then you found your total joy in Yeshua HaMashiach. Is
absolutely
on the back. So we just wanted to thank you so much for participating with. Thank you for watching Let My People Know. If this conversation has blessed you, please like, share, and subscribe. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Let My People Know.